Hello and welcome to the Five in the Midfield podcast. This is going to be episode 6, I believe, if I'm counting right. Today we're going to be breaking down a couple of different UCL, Premier League, Bundesliga topics. But before we get into any of that, I do want to say hi to all of our guests. Today we have our 3 returning guests, which of course, as always, are Corbin,
What it do, baby?
Matt,
Hey.
who's okay, and Colin.
Howdy doodly.
And then today we are joined by our relative Man City and Atletico Madrid expert, John Boyd.
Expert, very loose term there.
Loose, yeah, a loose expert. More of just a fan, I would say, which sometimes makes you an expert, sometimes it doesn't. But we'll put his expertise to the test later on in the episode for sure. So today, before we get into UCL, we wanted to do kind of a quick rundown on a couple of the European domestic leagues that are going on right now. And so today, the first thing that we're going to talk about is La Liga, but we're actually not going to be specifically talking about how the season is going. We're going to be talking about the big controversy that happened just a few days ago with Barcelona's signing of Martin Braithwaite. Of course, they were given the option to have an emergency transfer because of the Ousmane Dembele injury, and they again decided to sign Leganes striker Martin Braithwaite. And then, of course, Leganes tried to get their own emergency signing because they are currently in the midst of a relegation battle and were denied. And I know, Corbin, you were one who was very vocal about this situation, so I'm going to go ahead and let you take the floor first to kind of explain how you feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to just say it straight up. I really hope La Liga realizes this is catastrophic bullshit. Barcelona being, I think I tweeted about it. I can't remember if I did it from my own account or the Twitter account. It was pretty much, it was literally a display of the rich getting richer. It's really not fair that Barcelona, who are in a title battle, are allowed to do this, but Leganes, who are struggling to stay in the league, can't. Especially when that realistically, I believe, might have been their top scorer, probably one of their better players for the season so far. I also saw that when Eden Hazard went down again, that Real Madrid were considering putting in a question about them getting an emergency signing, which I think is also horrible because they would probably get it as well. And at that point, I think this becomes a huge, huge issue. So I think if La Liga was going to allow Barcelona to do it, they needed to allow everyone to do it. But it's literally like La Liga just pretty much broke FIFA's rules and told everyone, we don't really care. This is our team. We're going to let them do what they want. And I think it was definitely a bad look. I think it's going to end up being a bad look on La Liga's move, or on La Liga's head.
Listen, I agree. I think it is a bad look, but I do think the La Liga rules specify if a player is out 5 months, if he gets hurt and he's out for 5 or more months, that's when it can happen.
Is it only one player or is it multiple?
Yeah, I'd assume one player. Dembele's out 6+ months is what they have him listed out at.
It's
So
dumb as
technically
rocks.
under La Liga rules, but when Barcelona go and sign Leganes striker, then Leganes should have the chance to do the same with something else. And that's where it becomes kind of a domino effect. It's like, well, if you give Barcelona, if Barcelona does it under the rules, which they did, and then you let Leganes do that, and they take somebody else's good player, and then they do, it seems it's just completely unnecessary. Barcelona sold Antoine Griezmann. Luis Suarez has been injured. They had time in the January transfer window. They had the chance to build depth in the attacking positions, and they didn't. So they should be punished by not building depth during the transfer window. So the rule itself is completely ridiculous, but because the rule is in place, Barcelona technically didn't do anything wrong.
No,
they just said, "Hey, can we do it?" And La Liga said, "Yeah, that's the rules."
Yeah, I guess they didn't, but you hit it right on the head. The rule is just dumb as could be. I think it's definitely something that should be reconsidered. Can anyone remind me when Ousmane Dembele got hurt?
It was recently.
Well, it was in January, right? Like I'm pretty sure it was early to mid-January. Okay, so you still had time to go make a signing.
Exactly. They knew this
which
was
is the
happening.
problem.
They had time to prepare, and they.
Yeah, which I think that's the problem that I have with it is you had all this time to I mean they probably had 15 to 20 days at least to go make a signing, and they didn't do it. And then you wait till once the window is closed, and then you go to your league and be like, hey, can we make a signing? Like we're kind of in need of it. Like it came out like the day after he got hurt that he was going to be out for that long, and no one said a word about it. And so now they were stuck in this place, and now you're like, well,
yeah.
like
So
they kind
I was
of
gonna say,
like La Liga did this. Like they didn't do it to themselves, but I mean they just made a dumb rule, and of course the team that realistically probably doesn't. I mean, I think a big question for me also is, are they even going to use him? Like realistically, how often are they going to use him?
He has started a La Liga game, but he is not allowed to play in the Champions for Barcelona.
Okay,
that is also part of it. He can't play champ, but he has played a La Liga game already.
Okay.
I have a question as far as did Leganes they should have before they had to accept this transfer, correct? This is something they would have had to accept.
Potentially. I mean,
the only way they wouldn't have been able to accept or deny it is if it was a buyout clause on his contract, which I actually don't know for sure the contractual obligations of it. But that would be the only way that they wouldn't literally be able to say like yes or no.
I mean, I think this is a screw up on their part for not getting with La Liga ahead of time before accepting that deal and seeing if they would have been able to do that, because that's something you can definitely see beforehand, and if you won't be able to, then you can just deny it. I mean, I think it's kind of something that's both on them and La Liga. I think they both screwed up, but I think Barca doing whatever they can to make their team better is fine for them. I mean, and it's just more on Leganes for not doing their due diligence.
Yeah, I think it is just a little bit messed up though, but I understand why La Liga may have denied Leganes, and not more so of a rich gets richer thing, but at what point do you turn like the whole season to a transfer market? Because if Barcelona buys a Leganes guy, then Leganes goes out and buys someone else's player, and then that guy keeps on going. It just kind of erases the whole point of the transfer market. So it's a dumb rule that Barcelona was still able to do it, and the Leganes wasn't able to, kind of get their return on investment. But it's just like it would turn into a whole nother thing if they were, and it just kept on going and going.
Yeah. So just a quick fact check before we move on as well. I know we talked earlier about the date of Ousmane Dembele's injury. So it was originally reported by Bleacher Report actually on February 11th that he was going to be out 6 months after surgery. So it looks like the injury was actually after the transfer window had closed.
Jesus. Why did I feel like that was so much earlier?
So that was, again, probably about a week ago, or not a week ago, about 2 weeks ago. When this happened, it then again would have been after the transfer window. But either way, I think it's definitely an interesting scenario, and I don't know, unfortunately, for La Liga if there's like an 100% right answer in this scenario. So it's not. I think either way, they were probably going to get ridiculed because, we definitely brought up both points there. Obviously, Colin saying like you can't let every team in La Liga eventually just like basically have to make a move to try and balance things. So I don't know. It's interesting for sure, but we will move on now. I know we wanted to have a big discussion about the Bundesliga and the BPL. But one thing I did want to bring up, and this isn't something that we really have to get into a conversation about, but it is important, I guess, for news sake to have at least something to say about it, that the Italian government has decided that 4 different Serie A matches, which is Juventus-Inter, Udinese Fiorentina, Milan versus Genoa, and Sassuolo versus Brescia. All 4 of those matches will be played without fans because of the increasing coronavirus outbreak in Italy. Again, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that, but that was just something that I did want to bring up. And then again, obviously those 4 matches, and then they also announced that Lazio and Bologna, Napoli and Torino, Lecce and Atalanta, and Calgary and Roma will also be played without fans.
It's terrifying to think about, but that's about all I got.
I think it's something that they have a lot of countries are thinking about doing. They're the first country to really go out and do it that I know of, at least majorly. China might have their league ongoing. I'm not really sure right now. But I do think it's something that a lot of these leagues, especially in Europe, really do need to consider. Maybe even more so in America as well, with our high population. And it's one of those diseases, much like the flu, that a lot of people are going to get. It may not be the most deadly of diseases, but, a lot of people will have it, and it's easy to get. So I think this is just a safety precaution that we're going to be seeing not only in soccer, but in major sports as well, as possibly going to like baseball and everything else like that.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I do think it's interesting and to watch it happen.
I was gonna say again, not to like cross over my two worlds, but obviously like for the few of us in here that follow like competitive gaming, for example, like the League of Legends League in China hasn't played a match since January, like early.
They didn't even start their league.
Right, like like a couple of their game, like each team has played like 1 or 2 games each, and they were supposed to start like early. I mean, they started early December, and we're now in the middle of February, and they've all played like 2 games, and this was supposed to be a league that was running 7 days a week. And obviously, like even in Korea, kind of the same thing with like the League of Legends League. They don't have fans at any of their events, and things like that. So it's definitely not even just in soccer, but just like in every facet of kind of society. These places that have become more exposed to it are taking really, really heavy precautions, which of course is definitely important, and it's good to see, I think, in general. But we will move on quickly to the Bundesliga now. And I don't have as many things to talk about with the Bundesliga, I think, as we did with the Prem. But I know, Colin, you specifically had some general talking points that you wanted to bring up about the Bundesliga and how dominant not only they have been domestically this season, but how dominant their domestic league has been internationally in like Champions League and Europa League and things like that. So
yeah. So Bundesliga is just a league that I've really enjoyed watching. I've come to love for the last 2 years. I think the pace of play is a lot faster than what you might see in the Premier League, and the talent's a lot more than what you might see in the MLS. And so I think it's a good combination of the two. And recently, especially this year, they've become one of the greatest leagues in the world, if not the greatest league in the world. Is in the Premier League right now, it's kind of like it's a 2-horse show at this point between Manchester City and Liverpool, but I don't even know if you can call it that. How dominant Liverpool have been. They turned what was supposed to be the most competitive league in the world into their own plaything at this point. But what we've seen this season from the Bundesliga is how competitive it is at the top of the league. With let's see here, the top 5 teams: Bayer Leverkusen, Borussia Mönchengladbach, Borussia Dortmund, Red Bull Leipzig, FC Bayern Munich. They're all within 6 points of each other this far into the season, and there's still a couple teams nipping at their heels, like Schalke and Wolfsburg as well, all trying to get into the Europa League spots and Champions League spots. And not even more so than that, what they're doing on the European stage is nothing short of amazing. As through the actual knockout stage, they are now 8-0 combined. I think through Europa League and also the Champions League. They haven't really been tested. I believe the closest matchup so far has been Borussia Dortmund versus PSG. And I think the second game of that will be even more fun than the last one. I hope so, at least for PSG's sake. But I think the dominance that they're showing is unmatched by any other league in the world right now, if anybody else kind of wants to pick up off that.
Yeah, so I actually, before we let someone else pick off it, I'm not playing devil's advocate because I actually do, generally speaking, agree with your point. But one thing I would say to like slightly contest you is that Liverpool is definitely dominating the Prem, and Man City is obviously 7 points ahead of third. But the Premier League has actually been extremely competitive this season outside of Manchester City and Liverpool, and obviously that's something that we'll talk about. But I actually do think the Premier League has been pretty good this year. But again, I would generally agree that the Bundesliga has looked to be the strongest overall league so far. But if anyone else wants to take it from there.
It's no debate, like Colin said, when you look at the beginning of the knockout stages in Europa League and Champions League. Yeah, the league has been dominating. And then I personally think when you get past that, which again, Colin, you're absolutely right in that aspect. But when you look at just the league, it's just all about preference. Like you said, you like to see the Bundesliga play a little bit more, it's more fast paced, whereas Premier League, it might be more individual talent, like much like La Liga. And La Liga, I mean, for that matter, is just 2 or 3 teams stacked to the max of dominant players. So you're right in saying in Europe, Bundesliga has so far been the dominant force. And domestically, the Bundesliga is incredibly competitive at this point. But like Brennan said, Premier League is past Liverpool, who are the best team in the world, in my opinion, unquestionably right now. Past Liverpool, it's just as competitive on the way down, and I would say teams near 6th or 7th in the Premier League are just as good as the 4th place team in Bundesliga.
I might actually challenge that point a little bit. I mean, just currently looking at even like UEFA like Champions League like games recently, like Dortmund ahead of PSG, Bayern absolutely giving it to Chelsea, and even like Leipzig over Tottenham. I would say that Bundesliga is A, more competitive, and B, the top echelon might be better than the top echelon in the Premier League, minus Liverpool being ahead of by themselves. But even them losing 1-0 in Madrid to Atletico is a little bit of a black mark there.
Well, yes, Leipzig beating Tottenham, but Leipzig's second in the Bundesliga. Tottenham is what in the Premier League? Tottenham is fifth,
sixth or so,
seventh?
sixth or so, maybe.
They're
Sixth or
currently
seventh?
sixth.
Yeah, so Leipzig is better than Tottenham. I'm not arguing that. That's true, as we've seen in the head-to-head. But when you go further down Bundesliga, do we think Mönchengladbach is better than Tottenham? Do we think Schalke is better than Tottenham? Probably not. I love
Well,
seeing
I mean, at the current
Leipzig.
moment, maybe.
Well, Mönchengladbach might actually be. Schalke probably not so much.
I am all for Tottenham hate as an Arsenal fan. We know that.
The issue is it's a depleted Tottenham side.
Right. Okay. So are they better than Man
full
U, who's
strength?
just ahead of Tottenham? Are they better than Chelsea, who's just ahead of Tottenham? Probably not. But
I'd say Schalke no. Mönchengladbach has a chance if they played 9 times or if they played 10 times.
That's a neither here nor there. That's an argument
That's
that
fair.
will never be settled unless they play head to head.
That's fair.
And so the point that you're right, yeah. In Europe, Leipzig, second place Leipzig has beaten 6th place Tottenham, and I'm saying, yeah, Leipzig is better than Tottenham. But when you go further down Bundesliga, when you go further down Premier League, I think Premier League holds up better than Bundesliga does, and that might just be personal preference for me. Whereas Colin, you might say, well, even then, I think Mönchengladbach and Bayer are just as fun and just as good as Premier League teams at that level.
I definitely see what you're saying, Matt. I mean, I think both. I mean, I think both of your points are right. It's the upper echelon of the Premier League realistically is better than the upper echelon of the upper echelon of the Bundesliga is better than the upper echelon of the Premier League. But I think the Premier League is a deeper league right now than the Bundesliga as a whole. I mean, as we can see it, there's 3rd to 11th place, or 4th to 11th is separated by 10, 11 points or so. I mean, that's pretty absurd that the entire league can literally flip on its head from now until Easter. And that's something that I think a lot of people are kind of overlooking. I mean, you're literally just looking right now in the Premier League. A lot of things are focused on, like, anything from Chelsea to Sheffield United. Wolves are kind of in the conversation. But, like, Arsenal's right there, Burnley's right there, Everton's right there. Like, they're all right there with each other. So I think the Premier League is turning out to be a deeper league than some people think, even though I think it might be because a lot of teams or a lot of those 3rd to 6th teams are really struggling to maintain constant form. But I think what we're seeing in the international competitions are definitely something that the Bundesliga is dominating.
It's something you can't argue, absolutely. And so far in the knockout stages of the European competitions, Bundesliga has been head and shoulders better than everybody else.
And also, it would be nice to see some of these matchups happen in
right.
the next round of Europa, like maybe Man United versus somebody like Wolfsburg. We'll get to decide something like that, or
Maybe we'll get to see Arsenal against somebody in the next round.
No, not that.
Oh, Matt.
Matt, you had a bad day. Yeah, but Colin, I did fact check you. If I got it correctly, I think the Bundesliga in Europe is 5-0. Is 5-0 in the Champions League and Europa League with one game to play.
Yeah, that's what I was looking at as well.
Which, if I can count,
Frankfurt up 4-1 aggregate, right?
Yeah, and it's Frankfurt who is absolutely smashing Salzburg. So I guess I see what you're saying is you're talking about single games, Colin, that they're 8-0. But I'm thinking I guess I took it as the tie in total is
and by the way, that is 11th place Frankfurt.
Yeah, so 11. So Frankfurt, who realistically kind of sucks in Bundesliga, is having their way with Salzburg, who, if I remember correctly, is where Haaland left.
Yeah, they did kind of lose out on their one claim to fame.
Yeah.
I mean, Salzburg being a Red Bull team always has one or two guys that are really going to be good. This year was Haaland's year, and then quickly turned into not Haaland's year as he's moving on to Borussia Dortmund, onto greener ventures, and is absolutely dominating the Bundesliga and unfortunately dominating PSG as well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, definitely some good coverage there for the Bundesliga. And then the last league that I know we wanted to touch on before we get into the Champions League games was the Premier League. And I guess more specifically, not necessarily the top of the Premier League, because obviously Liverpool's basically run away with it at this point. Man City is 7 points ahead of second place in Leicester City. But then after Leicester City and you go down to fourth place, you have Chelsea at 44 points. And then after fourth place, if you go all the way down to 13th place, you have Crystal Palace just 11 points behind them. So you basically have this massive group of teams that are sitting in an 11-point differential, fighting for the last Champions League spot, and then obviously the Europa League spots on top of that. I guess actually technically probably the last two Champions League spots, depending on what happens with Man City. But I don't know, Matt, you were one of the ones who wanted to kind of bring this up as a topic just because of how kind of tight this race has been for these Champions League and Europa League spots. So I'll let you start with kind of how you're feeling about this sort of middle of the pack Premier League race that we have going on right now.
Let's be clear that when we put that in, we have Chelsea sitting there at 44, Crystal Palace and Southampton at the bottom there at 33 and 34. We're not saying Crystal Palace and Southampton, but it just shows how tight it is, everything in the middle. I mean, Southampton 3 points behind Arsenal, 2 points behind Everton.
Yeah, I was gonna say the actual genuine gap of 44 to 33 is actually a lot. I mean, that's almost 4 wins basically. But when that's fourth and 13th, obviously you're in for a very tight race of everything in between that.
Mm-hmm. And especially with Manchester City facing their European ban, and that makes 5th place now in Premier League. That makes that a Champions League spot. It just makes that race so much more valuable. And with this weekend, Manchester United and Everton playing, and Everton, since Carlo Ancelotti's been there, has been nearly perfect. I mean, they lost to Arsenal last weekend, but before that, they had been incredible under Ancelotti. Tottenham, Wolverhampton also on Sunday. There's every weekend from here on out, there's games that are going to be big games in deciding that 4th, 5th, 6th place spot, which are all European spots now that Man City is facing a ban.
That is being appealed, by the way.
Yes, they're facing a ban. It's not certain.
I'm not saying it's not going to get taken away, but it is being appealed.
It most likely won't take into effect in this year just because of how the judicial systems work these days. But in the perfect scenario where it does work out, it would be nice to kind of see these teams that wouldn't oftentimes get a chance. Leicester City at this point, they're 6 points up. Currently in 3rd place, they're sitting pretty comfortably. And they're a team that in the past has shown that they don't like to throw their leads away. They just go out there and win 1-0 all the time. But this year they do actually have a lot going for them, and I'm interested to see if they are able to pull it out and get to Champions League next year, I really do want to see what they can do in Champions League. Because when a lot of people think of the Premier League, they think of the big 6 teams. I'm sure everybody knows who they all are. You don't really think of Leicester City as someone that can really compete on the international stage. So, I don't follow up with Leicester City as much as you guys. So, what do you guys think of their, promises as far as the European company goes?
The reason I put them in this graphic of let's put them in that bunch is because Leicester City have kind of been stumbling-ish of late, and that's why I put City. I think City's a lock for 2. I don't think City's dropping below Leicester at this point. And I think if Man U, if Tottenham, if Chelsea can catch fire right now, they can catch Leicester in the next 4 weeks, realistically. And that's why I kind of put Leicester down here in that bunch. They're 6 points ahead of Chelsea, sure, but they could just as easily. And with their form they've been in, they're not looking like they were 7-8 weeks ago. And looking at Champions League for the next season, the one chance they've had at Champions League after they won the Premier League, right? They did not look good in Champions League at all. So you're right, Colin, with Jamie Vardy at 32. They need to, this summer they might bring in somebody to give them more depth at striker for Champions League and Premier League games. I would be interested to see if they, first of all, play out this season, which it looks like they're finishing Champions League regardless. But then next season, if they have the depth in their team this year to succeed in the Champions League next year.
I feel like they have an okay chance to succeed. Kasper Schmeichel is always just going to be that guy that is just your brick wall at the back. I know he's 33, but he's been doing it year in, year out, and I think he can keep that up. And then Vardy, he's 33 now, like you said, but he's still putting out numbers: 25 appearances, 17 goals, 4 assists so far in the Premier League. That's pretty good. And then they also got Kaliji Iheanacho, I think from Man City a while ago.
Yeah.
And he's only 23. He 10 appearances, 3 goals, 3 assists, which I think is pretty good if he can just become more of a solid guy in that lineup. And then having like Perez in there as well, I think they can definitely maybe make some noise in that Champions League.
Yeah, and I definitely think they finish in a Champions League spot for this season. I think it's gonna be kind of hard for them to fall out completely, even though we have seen the likes of their best players, Jamie Vardy and James Maddison, not be able to produce like they were a few weeks ago. But bringing up James Maddison, I think the issue for them is going to be where is he going to be next season? And I don't think anyone in here realistically believes he will still be at Leicester City. And that's even if they do make the Champions League. I think it's going to be very tough for them to hold on to him. I think it's going to be tough for them to bring someone in that can replace that type of player. And I think that spells a little bit of trouble, especially with how inconsistent Jamie Vardy is at sometimes. I hate to say it this way, but Jamie Vardy is literally a player that lives on everybody else shithousing people. And he waits for someone to stir up something, and then he balls. Because I think this season it was the stuff about the tweeting about Rebecca Vardy and all that stuff. And then he went bonkers. And he scored, 11 goals in 7 games or something ridiculous. He went off, and he lives on that type of stuff. But ever since he's kind of died down, nothing has happened. You have heard nothing about him for the past 4 or 5 weeks.
He has been an FPL letdown. I can tell you that for a fact.
Yeah, you're not kidding. That's exactly why I let him go, because I was getting desperate. And then at this point, yeah, I think the big thing is going to be where is James Maddison going to be, and if he does, and I think when he does leave, who can they get to replace him? Because they're going to have a lot of money to end up replacing him with. And I don't think the likes of Yuri Tielemans and company behind him are going to be able to fill the gap.
Well, one thing I would say is if you're okay, so I guess I have a question now almost for you guys. Do you guys actually believe that Leicester City is the 3rd best team in the Premier League?
No.
No, not truthfully.
At the very moment, no. But their season as a whole, their 27 games as a whole, they have far and away been the third best team. I think there is a giant gap between them and Chelsea or whoever you want to say is fourth best as
Gotcha.
a season as a whole.
Yeah, so not necessarily right now. I was just like asking as a general question, kind of more like what you said over the 27 games. But the real reason I asked that question is because my follow-up question was going to be, let's say this team makes Champions League, which at this point it seems very likely, I would say, that they will. With or without James Maddison, because I personally don't think it matters for the question I'm about to ask, but do you guys think that they would do anything relevant in Champions League with or without James Maddison next year?
They would need him.
Probably round of 32.
I think it, depending on the group they got, round of 32 or round of 16 is questionable. If
in
they
the
got
Champions
a
League?
favorable group, then sure.
Yes,
Champions.
yes, in Champions
I think
League.
it depends on how hard Vardy's partying.
That's fair. I think it's a long shot.
True.
I think they would be in Europa League contention, honestly. I just like even with James Maddison, I just don't think they have the depth that a lot of these other teams do have.
Exactly.
In the Champions
Exactly.
League. And like Leicester City is a team that they know how to perform in the Premier League. Like you obviously can get that from the past couple of seasons, and including when they won the title. They know how to operate the Premier League, but hopping into the BSS Champions Leagues, you're facing entirely different play styles. And it's not just like the same players week in and week out that you're comfortable with and watching video on. Like these guys are the top of the top when it comes to the Champions League. So I do think they would be hard found to do anything as far as I don't think they would get out of their group. I think they'd probably be sent down to their Europa League. But I think it would be a lot of fun to watch them in Europa League. I think that's somewhere where they really could make a run, honestly, just based on the talent levels there.
And let me say, the reason, Colin, that they do well in Premier League and not as well in Champions League in the past, or I'm sorry, the reason they do so well in the Premier League is because they only have to focus on the Premier League. We're looking at the table right now, Chelsea, United, Tottenham, all focused on multiple different competitions as well. Leicester, week in, week out, all they care about is Premier League.
Yeah, that was one thing I was going to say too, is I think Leicester City, to Colin's point, have done a really good job in the Prem, but I also don't think they've ever been relevant, not even just in their Champions League or times they've been in Champions League or Europa League, but also even domestic cups. They seem not uninterested in winning those. I mean, obviously, to a certain extent, every team is interested in winning it, but they don't ever seemingly put out necessarily their best side to go on and win one of those over retaining their top 4, top 5 kind of pedigree in the Prem.
Mm-hmm. I feel it.
But looking further down that Premier League list, can we make predictions? Can we go into that, making predictions on? So we all think Leicester's
you love predictions, don't you?
So let's do.
Well,
let's
such
do
a tight table.
Well, here's what we'll do. Here's what we'll do. Between all of those teams, you have 2 Champions League spots and you have 2 Europa League spots. Based on what you see and how many games they have left, which of course is 11. So every team on this list now has 11 games left. I would say we can kind of go in order, but who do you guys think will finish in the 2 Champions League spots and then the 2 Europa League spots?
Go ahead, Corbin.
Leicester City are going to finish in one of the Champions League spots. I will almost guarantee that today. Obviously, I'm going to pray to God that Man United can finish in the 4th or in the next one down. The issue is Marcus Rashford, who has been our best player this season, is out for quite a while still. Even though we did look rather good today in the Europa League, it was a 10-man Brugge side who kind of sucked.
That's actually... Yeah, I was going to say, before we continue with your prediction, that's one thing I did actually want to bring up as well, is there actually is a possibility that there could be 5 Champions League or 5 Premier League teams in the UCL next year, which would be cool for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely think that I do think United will slip into the 4th. Will slip into a number 4. I think somehow we're going to figure it out. We do play Manchester City in just a couple weeks. That's not going to go over well. I can promise you that now. But I will say, it's going to be extremely tight. I think Chelsea's going to finish in 5th. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and I'm going to say Tottenham are going to pretty much tank from here on out. And I'm going to give Sheffield United the 6th hole.
You know what, Corbin? I'm really mad you said that, because my bold take was going to be Sheffield United finishing 5th.
Close enough.
All right. So we'll go right to left as I'm seeing it. So that would put Matt up next if you want to go ahead.
Yeah. So Leicester locked in at 3.
Okay.
I think United of those competitors are looking the best right now, but United's next 4 games, Everton at Goodison and Everton with Carlo Ancelotti have been fantastic. Manchester City, Tottenham at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and Sheffield United. Those are their next 4 Premier League games. That is tough. Okay.
That's 4 straight 6-pointers. That's 4 straight 6-point games.
I think Frank Lampard and Chelsea can find a way to stay in that 4th spot. They don't have they have Liverpool coming up here, obvious loss. They have City a few weeks later. But, they play – am I looking at this right? I'm sorry. That Liverpool game's an FA Cup game, but they do play Liverpool in the back end of the season, and they play City in between. Other than that, it's Wolverhampton, Sheffield. Those are games that they should be expecting a point, maybe 3. I think Chelsea can manage to hold on to that 4th spot. I think United can hang on to that 5th spot. And are you ready for this?
You're going to say Arsenal at 6, and you're such a wank.
Lost a Premier League game since the turn of the year.
You're such a wank.
And now that we don't have to worry about Europa League, tear falls from my eye. Arteta is fully focused on qualifying for Europe next season. I think Arsenal can bypass Tottenham, who have Harry Kane gone for the next 5 or 6 weeks at least, and Heung-min Son out for pretty much season. And Jose Mourinho's Tottenham have not looked good at all outside of that Manchester City game. I think Arsenal can continue their run of form in the Premier League, jump Wolverhampton, jump Sheffield, and jump Tottenham to get into that 5th spot.
The sixth spot or 5th spot?
6th spot, sorry.
Oh, you're okay. Okay. So you said Leicester City 3rd. What'd you say? Chelsea 4th?
Chelsea, Man U. I'm sticking with that 3, 4, 5, and then Arsenal jump over the rest to get to 6.
Okay. John?
So yeah, what I was saying was earlier. I think it's pretty much going to hold about the same, except Sheffield United is going to jump up to that 5th spot. Everybody else below them is going to slide down one. So it'll be Chelsea, Sheffield, Man U, Tottenham. And I think that's going to happen because Sheffield has actually been on a bit of a tear recently. They've gotten 2 wins and a draw in their last 3. And then the game before that, they lost to Man City by 1. I think that, and even looking at their schedule coming up ahead in March, April, and May, it's nothing too difficult. They get Norwich and Burnley in a few of these games. They do have games against Man United and Tottenham, but those are weaker Man United and Tottenham squads that I think they can either draw or maybe just get outright wins against. So I see that this team is one that could maybe get that 5th, maybe even jump Chelsea for that 4th spot.
I am going to interrupt for just a second. Harry Kane's expected return date is May 9th, which is, I'm pretty sure, the second to last game of the season.
Yikes.
So I would, So for prediction purposes, you literally are just, you're going with Tottenham basically without Harry Kane, I would say.
Yeah, you're
going Heung-min Son out for season.
And Son, who's out for the year.
Yeah. That I actually think that the Heung-min Son injury probably hurts them more than the Harry Kane one does. Not that it's really a competition because both of them are gone, but
both of them are great, but both of them are gone. So you're right; it's not really much of a competition.
So John, you want to run through those again for us, 3 through 6?
So I have 3 Leicester. Let's go. I'm gonna be bold and say 4 Sheffield, 5 Chelsea, 6.
Changing us up again.
That was the most nonchalant. I'm going to be bold and say, you know what? Sheffield do jump into that Champions League spot.
Yeah, but Sheffield is a Champions League next season. Sander Berge is making that move.
All right, Colin.
All right. Well, just from what I can see here on my end, I don't think Leicester City is going to be dropping out of here anytime soon. Yeah. I think they're just going to pick up
6 points clear of 4th place with 11 games feels pretty safe, I would say.
Yeah, not only that they're 9 points, away from dropping out from Manchester United. So given if there are 2 Champions League spots there, they have 9 points to give until Man United, even has a chance to pass them, which I really don't think they do. But I think it's going to stay relatively the same here as far as the Champions League is concerned. I think Leicester City will hold. I think Chelsea will hold. a lot of those teams are struggling with injuries. A lot of those, usual powerhouses with Man United, Tottenham Hotspur, and Chelsea, all kinds of injuries to their top players there. I don't really know what's going on with Arsenal, but I don't think Arsenal fans really know either for at least the last couple of years.
Whoa.
So, so I don't really trust them there. But I do think this is an interesting year for those teams that that don't usually get the limelight. So I do think Leicester City and Chelsea do make the Champions League. But for the Europa League, I think I'm going to go along the lines of what you other guys are kind of looking at here. I think Tottenham Hotspur will pull out in front of Man United, and they'll get that number 5 spot there, or number 6 spot. Would that be actually?
I think that'd be the 5 hole.
Yeah, that would be the 5. That would be the 5 spot. Yeah, and I think coming up behind them would actually be Wolverhampton Wanderers, because they have been absolutely exceptional so far this season to be where they're at, and coupling alongside that with now they're in Europa League, so they're just working it out at this point how they're trying to actually get all of that together. And from here they do have a really, really easy schedule as far as the Premier League goes, so it's not always going to be the easiest. I know upcoming they are facing, the Tottenham Hotspurs, heavily depleted Tottenham Hotspurs at that. But then outside of that, going on for the rest of the year, they face Brighton, they face West Ham, Bournemouth, Aston Villa, Arsenal, Sheffield, Everton, Burnley, Crystal Palace, and Chelsea. I'm scared of maybe Chelsea out of all those games. And I think Wolves could really make a run for it, like maybe even higher than Europa League. They could make a run for the Champions League with that schedule coming up. And I think that Chelsea Wolves game could decide who is that last team in for Champions League at the end of the season.
I think you mean that Sheffield Wolves game.
That'll be on April 19th, not quite the end of the season.
No, that's the decider.
All right. Well, my final, or excuse me, I guess I'm last to make my predictions. I actually, Corbin, you're gonna love to hear this, but I actually think Manchester United is going to finish third.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was gonna say that might be a hot take, but I'm here. But we are here for those.
Yeah. So I actually don't trust. I actually don't trust Leicester City, Chelsea, or Tottenham, to be honest with you. And I, in the past, have not trusted Manchester United, but my gut feeling right now actually tells me that they're on an upswing for the first time in a while. And yeah, so I actually, in my predictions, I'm going to predict Manchester United to finish third in the Premier League. I think they will actually... I'm not going to say that they'll almost win out, but I actually think that Manchester United will do pretty well for the rest of the season. Obviously, they have a very, very big game against Man City. If they win or even get a point out of that one, that's going to make the confidence of my prediction feel a lot better. But I'm actually going to predict Manchester United to finish third, Leicester City to finish fourth, Chelsea to finish fifth, and it's actually tough for me. Tottenham, I don't really trust Tottenham, Sheffield, or Wolverhampton, and Arsenal, I think, is pretty 50-50. They're very coin flip for me, which is why it's so hard to kind of figure out who I want in that 6th spot, because obviously, for all of those, 4 teams that I just mentioned, it's literally 3 points separating those 4. My gut feeling actually does tell me Arsenal, like Matt said in his prediction earlier. I think Arsenal actually will probably be the team that ends up taking it. I would have said Tottenham if it wasn't for the Kane and Son injuries, or I actually probably would have said Tottenham even if Kane was injured but Son wasn't. But I think without both of them, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. So I actually am going to say Tottenham will finish, or Arsenal, will finish 6th.
Let's not forget, the last day of the season is Chelsea and Wolves, and then Leicester United. So both of those games could be ridiculously important, and that's what we need on decision day.
A very big battle to see who finishes behind Sheffield.
Well, Sheffield plays Southampton that day, so potentially.
Southampton's got 34 points. Don't count them out yet.
No. Southampton need to lose out. West Ham has some ground to gain to get out of the relegation zone.
Colin, it's okay. We'll just replace West Ham with the better team next year. My boys.
For sure, Fulham's in 14.
So now we have
they're in 3rd. Let's calm down.
So John is the resident City, Atletico, and now Fulham fan here, right?
Now Fulham. It's been Fulham. I had to give him up when they
John
dropped
doesn't
out.
have an alliance.
I'm just saying you're covering 3 teams for us.
Oh, well,
it was.
I mean, 2.5.
Well, it was previously Fulham. It's now Sheffield United. Actually,
Yeah, I mean,
true.
We only like Sheffield fans.
All right. But we are going to take a quick break real quick, and then when we come back, we are going to do Champions League and talk about all those matchups, and then look forward for the second leg previews. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. All right,
this podcast is